The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show was originally broadcast on March 16, 2021.
Aloha and welcome, Maui, to Business Matters. This is a radio show brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and I am your host, Pamela Timpot, president of the Chamber. We are pleased to bring back this radio show. Today we are going to feature three exciting topics. The first is the latest Economic Stimulus Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, and federal assistance for businesses. We'll also talk about Maui real estate and the changing market during COVID-19 and its impact on housing. And we're going to meet Maui Jelly Factory's new owner this morning. So we are excited to have you with us this morning and hope you'll tune in. We're going to be weekly every Tuesday for the next 12 weeks. Today I'd like to welcome Jennings Imel. He is the Executive Director, Western Regional Office, and is in Congressional and Public Affairs Division with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Today, our friend Jennings will provide information on the new American Rescue Plan Act in terms of business and government support and other federal programs to assist businesses. He can tell you all about the American Rescue Plan Act and what it means for our county and state government. So, Jennings, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Pam. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on. We are so excited to talk to you today, and we are just really dying to know about this new American Rescue Plan Act. And can you begin by telling us a little bit about how the new funding coming down will be doled out to our state and what it means for our state and our county?
Sure, absolutely. Happy to talk about the state and local funding side and kind of go over some of the highlights of this plan. Obviously, it's a big package, $1.9 trillion, so there's a lot to unpack and digest there. But kind of want to start by saying, thank you to you, Pam, and thank you to the Maui Chamber for your many years of friendship and partnership. You've been great partners to the U.S. Chamber, and thank you for all that you do on behalf of the business community on Maui and advocating on their behalf. Really at all levels of government, whether it's local, state, and federal. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
The American Rescue Plan, it's obviously, it's very large. There's $350 billion set aside for state and local governments. Just kind of really quickly, some of the other major highlights, $410 billion set aside for the kind of economic impact payments. Those are the stimulus checks to individuals making less than $75,000 a year, and for couples or joint filers making less than $150,000 a year. There's an extension of the unemployment insurance supplemental at $300 per week that's been extended through the first week of September. This greatly expands the child tax credit as well as the earned income tax credit. The child tax credit gets boosted from $2,000 to $3,000. And then for children under the age of 6 to $3,600, $129 billion for K through 12 for school reopening. There's about $50 billion for COVID vaccine development, deployment, and distribution. And of course, there's the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which is an important aspect, which I'll talk about later. On the state and local side, $350 billion. About 60% of that is going to be dedicated to the states, 40% to local government. So that means we're going to be seeing about $220 billion to states and tribal governments. There's going to be a pot of $25.5 billion split evenly between all 50 states and Washington, D.C. And then there's the largest contingent is $168 billion that's going to be distributed based on state unemployment rates at the end of the year 2020. On the local side, there's $130 billion for local governments. $65 billion of that is going to be dedicated to counties based on population, and $45.6 billion dedicated to metropolitan areas. I'll also mention, as it relates to the state of Hawaii, there's an interesting study done by the Tax Foundation that found that, of course, not surprisingly, Hawaii was one of the hardest hit states in terms of revenue loss over the course of the pandemic, losing $1.15 billion in tax revenue in 2020. This American Rescue Plan actually provides, when you combine state and local funding, $2.1 billion back to the state of Hawaii. So more than enough to cover the gap that we saw in 2020. $1.6 billion specifically to the state of Hawaii and $480 million to local governments. So a big benefit here for the state of Hawaii to take advantage of, and of course that means potentially additional programming at the state and local level for small businesses as well.
That is fantastic, and I know that the U.S. Chamber has been, a strong advocate for working with Congress on these programs and educating them on the impacts on businesses. And, to see that this kind of money is coming forward, and this is going to be such a great relief. I know locally our governor has said things like furloughs, we don't even have to look at things like furloughs at this time because of the federal relief, and that is a tremendous relief as we look to move our government forward and keep people employed. Our big thing at the Maui Chamber of Commerce is really helping to shore up businesses and helping to shore up our county and our state so that we can keep people gainfully employed during this time. And it's been a huge issue. And when you said the money was going to be based on, in part, those who had the most challenging unemployment numbers, we went from the lowest unemployment in the nation to the highest unemployment in the nation. And I remember when we got that first number, the April numbers came in May, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night with my heart pounding, just going, my gosh, you're the chamber president who's looking at this dynamic in remote islands in Hawaii. And of course, we're very reliant on the visitor industry. So we've really seen that unemployment just soar and unfortunately held that title for many months in 2020. So, but it's good to know that those kinds of things are being looked at when they're looking at where to apply the relief. And that's good to know. You mentioned, and I want to talk about it because it's with this added round of stimulus funding, it's such an important program. Our restaurants and bars and food establishments have just been in dire straits. Can you talk about this new program specifically geared to this industry, why it's important, what it's going to look like, and how people can apply?
Sure. I think that's a great point. And, restaurants and the hospitality industry have really been two of the hardest hit industries. And, of course, those are two of the most prominent industries on Maui and the state of Hawaii. So I think the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which was included in this package, could potentially be a real benefit for a lot of the businesses there. This is based off of the kind of Restaurants Act that had been discussed really for the last year or so. There had been a lot of movement on Capitol Hill to try to get this passed. And finally, this fund was included in the American Rescue Plan. It's a $28.6 billion fund. Or it's a grant program, essentially, that's going to be administered by the Small Business Administration. So this is directly from the SBA, directly from the federal government. So it's very much different from the Paycheck Protection program, which a lot of folks, I'm sure, are familiar with. That's done through your bank or lender. This is going to be through the SBA. There are some things that we know about it, obviously, but there are some things that have yet to be kind of determined. This bill, of course, was passed, officially signed into law last week. So the SBA still has to get this program up and running. So we'll be looking for additional guidance from the SBA as well as an application form and things like that. But what we do know about this is, first and foremost, there's going to be $5 billion set aside for small restaurants. So this is restaurants with less than $500,000 in gross receipts. We also know that once the application portal comes online, the first 3 weeks are going to be dedicated specifically to minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and businesses that are in economically distressed areas. We also know, in terms of eligibility, that, this is, of course, a restaurant revitalization fund, so this is for restaurants. That means, bars are included, breweries, wineries, brew pubs, food trucks, caterers, they're all included as part of that kind of restaurant umbrella. There is a cap on the number of restaurants that you can have. It's a 20-unit cap. And the only other real restriction is that the company that receives the grant cannot be publicly traded. However, if you are a franchise of a publicly traded company, that's totally fine. This is open to franchisees. In terms of the grant itself, this is designed to replace lost revenue in 2020. So the grant amount that you would be receiving as a restaurant would essentially be your gross revenue in 2019 minus your gross revenue in 2020. So you'd be eligible to receive that or $5 million, whichever is less. So there's a $5 million cap on the grant amount, and if restaurant group, there's a $10 million cap. So we think that this is really a great opportunity for restaurants. As a matter of fact, we expect that this is going to be a very popular program. We do anticipate potentially running out of that $28.6 billion once it comes online. So we're encouraging folks to really get prepared, even though we don't have all the information and we don't have the application form from the SBA. There are some things that you can do as a restaurant owner to prepare to apply for this. Now, because this is going through a government program through the SBA, that means there are going to be a few more steps than what you had to do potentially with the PPP. First and foremost, you're going to want to get what's called a DUNS number. So what you can do is you can just kind of easily Google DUNS, D-U-N-S, or Dun & Bradstreet, and they will be able to give you a number that you can use to apply for a SAM number, which is through the System of Award Management. This is kind of a system that the government sets up when they do business and when they give out grants and things like that. So essentially, as a business, you're going to need these identification numbers so the government knows who you are. So to get that DUNS number, it usually takes about 2 days or so. Once you have applied and you receive the DUNS number, then you could go to sam.gov, enter your DUNS number as well as your tax ID number, and be able to get kind of login information with SAM. So you'll be officially registered in the government system. That takes about 2 weeks. While you're taking the time to do that, we'd also encourage you to prepare your paperwork, the necessary paperwork that shows your gross revenue loss in 2020. And then once you have those things, those three major components kind of lined up, you have your DUNS number, you're registered with SAM, and you have your paperwork all together, you'll be in great position to apply for the grant program once it comes online.
Thank you, and I'm so glad that you covered, Jennings, how people can get prepared. And a lot of our farmers and other programs have gotten DUNS and SAM numbers, but many haven't. And so I really encourage everybody to get this going, because as Jennings said, it does take a few days to get your DUNS number, and then you'll need the DUNS number to get the SAM number. And so, get on that now. You don't have to wait. Get on that now. And as he said, start preparing the paperwork, because what we want to do, in the past, and hopefully we won't see that this round, but in the past when people were going for the first PPP round, we were going online, we were trying to get things in, and it just seemed like some of our applications were not getting through as quickly as, of course, mainland applications. So we want to make sure everybody is prepared and can get in as early as possible. And again, now we're going to go through the SBA. When you talk about their paperwork, basically you're saying they need to show the numbers. What kind of things can they show? Can we use their company financials? Are they going to look at their general excise tax records to show that loss? What kind of financial documentation would you recommend, Jennings?
That's a good question as far as the specific documentation is concerned. I think that we'll probably have a little bit more clarity on that once we get guidance from the SBA. As I said, this is a brand new program. We've already seen the SBA have significant delays in kind of putting together their shuttered venue operating grant, which hopefully, by the way, will be online soon. But the same thing goes for this restaurant revitalization fund. I will say that Isabel Guzman, who is up for SBA administrator, is expected to be confirmed this week, and I think really the talk on Capitol Hill is to apply pressure to her, really kind of stress the point that this program for restaurants really needs to get up and running as soon as possible. And so I think one of the first things we can expect to see is guidance and potentially an FAQ sheet that will kind of list the specific documentation that businesses are going to need. So please, kind of be on the lookout for that. SBA.gov is a really good resource.
Fantastic. We will, and of course, we'll make sure it's also posted on our chamber website as well, so you can look there as soon as it's available at mauichamber.com. We keep you up to date on different programs that can help your business. Jennings, thank you so much for sharing about that program because it's so important to hear. I mean, our bars and restaurants have really struggled, and of course, we're still operating not at 100% capacity, at 30% capacity now. But, as vaccinations roll out, we're going to start seeing that change, and we're working toward that herd immunity as quickly as we can. But I also know that through this, other programs got some additional funding. And so that's helping to continue some of the other programs that had been in existence that maybe people hadn't applied for. They thought maybe the money had run out or was running out and it might be too late. Can you share some of the other federal programs beyond what the SBA regularly offers to assist businesses that got some additional funding through this new act?
Sure. There are three major programs that were changed, and I think were made more attractive for businesses in this bill. And then one program which unfortunately wasn't changed in this bill, but we're very confident is going to be addressed this week by the House and next week by the Senate. So starting with that, it's the Paycheck Protection program, which is probably the program that most of your businesses are familiar with. The application deadline for this program is the end of the month. It's March 31st. So that's when it's supposed to be cut off. As a matter of fact, we've already heard of some lenders even closing their portals down already just as they work through the backlog of all the applications that they've received. So we've been calling at the U.S. Chamber for Congress to extend that deadline. It was not included in the American Rescue Plan, but we expect the House to pass an extension this week that would extend it through the end of May, and then the Senate would likely take it up next week. So we should be able to see an extension for at least a couple of months on the Paycheck Protection Program, which I think is great news for folks that are either interested in a first draw PPP loan or a second draw PPP loan. The other major changes were to the Shuttered Venue Operating Grant. The biggest change there is the fact that this bill allows for businesses to apply for that grant, of course, once it comes online, but then also to receive a PPP loan. So if you've already received a PPP loan, whether it's a first draw or second draw, and you operate a live venue that does the majority of your business through ticket sales, and you're interested potentially in applying for a Shuttered Venue Operating Grant, you don't have to worry about choosing one or the other, PPP or the Shuttered Venue Grant. You can apply for both. So hopefully that grant will becoming online soon, but I think that's an important change. On the Employee Retention Tax Credit, which is something that we love to talk about at the U.S. Chamber because it wasn't really taken advantage of last year. It was boosted significantly in the December stimulus bill. Essentially allows for qualifying businesses, so long as they've experienced at least a 20% reduction in gross receipts in any quarter in 2020 relative to the same quarter in 2019. It allows those businesses to get access to up to $7,000 per employee in tax credits for the first 2 quarters of 2021. Now, this American Rescue Plan actually extends that through the end of 2021. So now businesses can theoretically get access to tax credits of up to $7,000 per employee per quarter, so $28,000 per employee. Really, really big benefit. We encourage anybody that's interested to look into that, talk to your accountant, talk to whoever does your payroll. That's a really, really important benefit, I think, that's out there for folks. And then lastly, this is kind of going back to the Families First Act. If you all recall, this was before the CARES Act. It seems like so long ago, last year. If you all remember that there was a paid leave mandate and a tax credit that went along with that. The mandate on providing paid leave is gone, but the tax credit remains per this latest bill. So if you provide paid sick leave to folks in your workplace, you can still potentially be eligible for the tax credit that's been extended through the end of this year. So those are a couple of the important changes that I want businesses to be aware of.
Those are all important changes. Thank you so much, Jennings. You have just covered a wealth of information in a very short time, and I know that this is something that you folks are living day in, day out, and staying on top of this so that you can inform everybody across the nation. And we appreciate that great partnership. Maybe one final question for you, Jenny, is what is the thing that you're hearing most? I know you represent the Western region, and Hawaii is part of your territory. What is the thing that you're hearing most that businesses are still looking for? What do they really need and want most beyond some of these federal programs that have been put out there to address the broader issues?
Right. I think the thing that we hear about the most, quite frankly, is the need for bipartisanship, the need for members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to come together and get things done. Just quite frankly, it's that simple. Whether it's in relation to the pandemic and COVID relief, or infrastructure is a big topic. That's probably going to be the next big topic in D.C. Immigration reform, there's been a lot of movement on that lately. I mean, these are big issues that business really cares about, has cared about for a long time. And we just want to see things get done. And the only way things are going to get done is if Republicans and Democrats come together and are willing to compromise and find some bipartisan solutions. So bipartisanship is really kind of one of the key things that we hear from the business community, and that's what we're stressing and incentivizing in D.C.
I deeply appreciate all that work, and it's funny. I mean, at the bottom line, that's what we hear every day. I think sometimes in Maui County, while they don't call it bipartisanship as much over here in our local community, the point is depoliticize the process. We just want to see things get done. Whatever it takes, we've got to find ways to come together, and we've got to come up with solutions. We're in a pandemic, and we need things done, and we need movement quickly, and we need to, get the recovery on a fast track. So I totally hear that, and we would echo that here. We just maybe say it a little bit differently. But thank you so much, Jennings, for joining us. I appreciate you joining us. It's earlier in the morning for us than it is for you in California, but we deeply appreciate you making this time available in your very busy schedule to join us. And we look forward to continuing to work with you through this, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Pam. I appreciate it.
You bet. All right. Well, I'll be talking to you soon, Jennings.
Sounds good. Thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Aloha. So Jennings was joining us on the phone from California. I forgot to mention that when I introduced him, but we're so grateful for his partnership. He comes out every year for our, not this past legislative opening, but normally he comes out every year for our state legislative opening, and works with all of the chambers across the state of Hawaii. So we're excited to have him as a wonderful partner and friend. I wanted to take a quick moment to share a little bit about some of the activity we've been doing at the state legislative level. The Maui Chamber of Commerce is the voice of business, and we are constantly advocating on the county, state, and federal level, as Jennings mentioned. And right now we're in the middle of the state legislative session. We just had crossover last week. So that means that bills that made it through crossover are still alive. And I just wanted to share a couple of quick bills with you. One of our top priorities this year was ensuring that the unemployment insurance rate schedule was brought down so employers' rates would not increase tremendously. And we were hoping actually to hold it at the current rate. But without a legislative fix, rates for employers could have gone up on average of $600 per employee, up to upwards of $2,600 per employee, depending on the employer's UI rating. So we worked very hard with chamber partners across the state, legislators, and the administration jumped into action. And there were several bills presented, but House Bill 1278 was fast-tracked. This was a bill that adjusted the rate schedule from Schedule C in 2020 to Schedule D this year and next. So it held it to D for 2 years. And the Department of Labor really wanted to ensure that we went to Schedule D because that ensured that everybody was participating in the process. So that was a big part of it. There were other bills that were also presented that didn't have the same savings that this bill, 1278, had. So while ultimately we fought to the wire to try and keep it at Schedule C, at least for the first year, of all the bills that were moving forward in this legislative session, 1278 was by far the best bill, and that is the bill that passed. And it's already been signed into law by Governor Ige on March 2nd. So that ensured that we didn't have the rate jump that would have otherwise gone to Schedule H. So we're very excited that we got that relief passed this year because it was something that was very concerning for all businesses. Another bill we want to bring up because a lot of people are hearing about it now, it's Senate Bill 56. This bill would increase Hawaii's highest state income tax rate to the highest in the nation, from 11% to 16% from anyone making $200,000 or more. Currently, California charges 13.3% on income over $1 million. It also increases the corporate income tax, and this is where businesses were saying, this is a very difficult time for us, and we're seeing a corporate income tax go from 5.4 to 9.6. So, this was a huge concern. People were speaking out. We were speaking out. It did cross over from the House, it did cross over from the Senate to the House, but it has received a quadruple referral, and that is very hard to overcome, meaning it would have to go through 4 committees to move on. So it's unlikely that this bill would move on, but if this is a concern to you, this is something that you would need to share with legislators. It is still alive, but with the committee referrals, if it was going to move over, it would have to be heard in the first 2 committees by the end of day this Thursday in order to move forward. So we'll be keeping everybody posted. You can check out the Chamber's website at mauichamber.com and look for information on that. And on a lighter note, there are also 2 bills that are still alive that create a commercial rent relief grant program for businesses, House Bill 1324 and Senate Bill 946. This would allow small businesses to recover without causing further hardships to also not only the businesses but to real estate industry and commercial landowners. So this is a program that would apply to businesses whose commercial rental space is classified as commercial, industrial, or hotel and resort, and for rent forgiven on or after April 1st, 2020. This is a great opportunity for continued small business assistance, and we hope that you'll ring in and support these bills as well. So now what I'd like to do is, I just wanted to give you that quick update. I do want to mention that Amber Koutsos is our legislative liaison with the Maui Chamber of Commerce, actually our legislative manager, and she tracks the bills that we've been looking at. Each year thousands of bills are introduced, and this year was no different. So we had a lot of bills introduced this session, and we were tracking over, she said 2,800 bills were introduced this session, and we were tracking over 200 bills. So it's something that we spend a lot of time doing every year, and are pleased to say that we've had some great wins early on, and we are continuing to educate our lawmakers on the challenges that businesses face. I know that Gary, we've got our friend Jason is here, so I want to now welcome Jason Economou. He is the Government Affairs Director for the Realtors Association. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Pam. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, I am so glad to have you with us. Thank you so much for being with us. We have seen so many of our industries really suffer during COVID-19. But it's nice to know that the industry you represent, the real estate industry, has been doing well. And I appreciate you joining us because people are really interested in knowing what's happening in real estate now. What are the current trends? Where are sales coming from? And, we saw in January that the median home price has now soared to $980,000. So we'd like to learn from you on how this recent activity has led to that. And could you please share your thoughts and impacts with us on how this correlates with home ownership for local residents?
Yeah, that is quite the question to unpack, but I will try my best. Let me start off by prefacing and saying we didn't expect this to happen. So anybody that says at the beginning of the pandemic they knew that housing was going to take off, They're probably not being honest with you, because at the beginning of the pandemic, we really expected a bit of a crash. And for about a month and a half, everything sort of stood still for a minute.
Yes.
What we ended up seeing was really that the issues that were affecting housing as a sector prior to the pandemic were really just kicked into overdrive. This pandemic had a way of exacerbating problems that already existed. And one of the major problems that existed prior to the pandemic was lack of inventory. Lack of housing inventory for rent and lack of housing inventory for sale. And this was not just locally, this was nationally as well. Part of it was the high cost of materials and shipping, along with the regulatory hurdles of getting things built here in Hawaii and Maui specifically. Maui had already been far behind where it needed to be to meet the housing demand before the pandemic, and the pandemic just made the problem worse. The mortgage moratorium protected a lot of folks who are property owners or were property owners that might have been going through economic hardship. So those quote-unquote bargains that you might have expected never materialized. So that kept everything at market level as the basis. And then what happened was we got what a lot of economists call the K-shaped economy. And if you don't know what that means for the listeners, it basically means if you were doing good at the beginning of the pandemic and you kept your job, you are probably doing a lot better now. If you were doing not so great at the beginning of the pandemic and you lost your job, things got pretty bad for you. Things largely got worse. And at the very least, it got more difficult for you to participate in the housing market. So on Maui, part of what has impacted the cost is a real uptick in high-end property. We had a lot of folks from the mainland who realized that they could do their jobs anywhere. They had that freedom. They didn't lose their jobs. They might have been in technology. One of those sectors that they did have that mobility and that high pay already. And so they decided to move to Paradise. Can't blame them. However, here on Maui, we've had systemic issues that have made it hard for people to participate in the housing market for a long time. And those systemic issues were also exacerbated by the pandemic. So we had very high unemployment. There's been stagnant wage growth for a long time. And there hasn't been a lot of effort for many decades now on building capacity for our residents. And what I mean by that is people aren't educated on basic economics. They're not educated on what a credit score is and how to, say, keep their credit good. They're not educated on what it takes to get into the housing market. And I'm not knocking anybody on any income level. These are things that I didn't know. And I went to school. I went to college. I went to graduate school. I have a good standard education, but when it comes to economics, these things are not intrinsic, and people need to be taught how to get into the housing market. So it created this perfect storm where, with inventory already low, the prices just kept on going up. And then when you have folks coming and buying those higher-end properties, it skews the median and average price of housing. So when you look at a median number and you see $980,000, to the unsophisticated buyer, they're going to think that they're getting a bargain on anything below that, even if it's an overpriced home. So we've seen people for years now, but it happened even more so on Maui, inflating the price of their homes that they're putting on the market. So you might have a house in Pakakalo that 2 years ago would have sold for $600,000. Now somebody has it on the market for $800,000. And it was already a little bit overpriced at $600,000. So as I said, the pandemic has really just made all of the problems that we already had a little bit worse to a lot worse.
It's funny. You mentioned something that I keep saying myself. It really, the pandemic has exacerbated, and And I don't want to say shine a light, put a glaring beam on everything that, were challenges that we already had, and now they're things we realize that in this time, it's so glaring that now we really have to focus on solutions, because all local residents, we want to have a home. We also understand that, not everybody's ready for a home. We also need rentals, so we need affordable homes. We also need affordable rentals. And, there's so many different regulatory things that are different in Hawaii. Many of them were meant to protect our environment, and some of them are very good things. And then there's just many layers of bureaucracy and processes and the time that things are taking to get through that always increase the cost of housing. And now we're at this point where we're looking at this major constraint. We have a lack of both market houses and affordable houses where local residents can either move up into or get something new. And we have a lack of affordable rentals. And I know, Jason, you and the real estate industry have focused on this quite a bit. What kinds of policies do you feel would be most helpful right now? What do we do now to move beyond the crisis state that we're in, and we've been in for quite some time, and we saw very little housing built during the Great Recession, and now we're in a period of Great Reset. So in this period of Great Reset, as I like to call it anyway, what kind of policies do you think would be most helpful to get new homes built for local residents?
Yeah, that is also a really big question to unpack. The housing crisis, we often hear about the housing crisis, but it's not just one problem. It's actually a bunch of problems that are all rolled into one major issue. And it helps if we break it up a little bit. So we need to think about the affordable housing as a whole, and we need to think about the people who need this housing. And the truth is, if you're making less than 80% of the area median income as a household, your focus really needs to be on finding affordable rental housing. For those folks, that section of our population, which is a major portion of our populace, we need to focus on increasing rental inventory, because those households will have a really challenging time qualifying for the loans that they need in order to become market participants in the purchase of housing. So for those folks, mandating that you make 75% of your houses affordable to people making 80% area median income and below. The county council doesn't have the power to do that. They don't have the power to force developers to build lots of housing and then sell it at a massive loss. That's just not how capitalism works. And I know we all have complaints about capitalism, but we live in a capitalist society. So any policy that thinks it can mandate what developers do, that's just going to be bad housing policy, because everything in our society ends up being a partnership between the community and the businesses that exist in that community. That's the idea behind free market economics. In a nutshell, I just oversimplified years of economics education. But really, what we need is a focus on increasing rental housing inventory for folks making below 80% AMI. And then we do need better policy when it comes to folks making, or households making, above 80% of the area median income. And some of the best tools, in my opinion, that we have for that might be the community land trust model. So Nahaleo Maui is the organization on Maui that's doing community land trust housing. And the idea behind that is, instead of buying the land and buying the house on the land, you are getting a 99-year lease for the land that can be transferred for another 99 years to your heirs. It can be re-upped automatically. And then you're buying the house that's on that leased land. And it's one of these models that a lot of people are skeptical of, because we all have been taught that we want to have all of it or none of it all. We don't like sharing as people. However, I think it's a great model because it uncouples the cost of improvements from the cost of the land. And when you have a resource like land on, Maui, which is naturally limited, it is going to get inflated. The price is going to go up because we can't spread out. So I think more community land trust housing for those folks in that solidly working class group of 80% AMI to 140% AMI. Those are the folks that can enter the housing market. They can qualify for the lending that they need. And community land trust housing, that can even be a stepping stone where you stay in that house for 10 years or however long, and then you can sell it. It'll stay affordable in perpetuity, but with the land trust models, you can still make money on all the improvements that you put into the housing, and then you could roll that up into moving up the ladder. But the problem with Maui's housing ladder is we haven't been building at the rate that we need to. So there's not a lot of housing for those folks to move up into the ladder. So that's one of the major challenges. And then in addition to the community land trust model, I think one of the policy shifts that we need to have is we need to focus on higher density for some of our development, especially if it's going to be rental inventory or those entry-level homes. For anybody listening, your affordability is going to be linked to some luxury. And in a sense, the density is linked to affordability. And what we've seen historically is that the condo market is going to be more affordable for entry-level participants in the housing market than single-family homes. Because if you want a yard, if you want that space, you're going to pay for it. So I think we need to really open up to the concept of density. I think we need to open up to different types of housing models. And we need to stop focusing on this idea that the county council can somehow mandate developers to build a single-family, beautiful plantation home for everybody, even if that individual is on a fixed income of $600 a month. We need to be realistic and understand the limitations of the system that we're in, and that system requires us as a community to pay for the goods that we consume. So any policy that is not based on at least some conversation with developers and it's not backed by some, look at an economic study, you could just assume that it's probably not going to work because it's well-intentioned, but intentions don't negate consequences. I have a friend who recently said, hope is not a plan. Hope is not a strategy. So we need to stop being. I'm gonna make a confession here. I'm going to confess that I understand the skepticism when developers talk, and I understand why there's a mistrust of developers in Hawaii given the history of this place. But if we're going to continue to vilify developers, and if we're going to continue to make it harder for developers to do anything in Maui County, they're just going to leave Maui County. So we need to figure out a way to work in connection with the people that we need to build our housing for us.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. My thing is really, we are so blessed to have so many local home builders here. And we use the term developers, but really these are the people that are building the homes. They're the ones getting it done. And we have so many local home builders here. And they are trying very hard to work in Maui County and make projects pencil out. And when they see some of these mandates come forward, they're trying to educate our elected officials to say, let me explain why this is problematic. And sometimes really they're just not being heard. And yet, as you point out, there's other markets that they can develop in. There's other places in the state, just in our state alone, other islands that are far more agreeable to working with the home building community and really streamlining projects in different ways. And if we don't recognize that impact, or, and then what we're left with is, then we're going to really need the county to step up and build. Because if we're turning people away, then the county's going to have to fill a role, and we know that the home building community is more efficient at it. So what we're saying right now is, why would we do any policy that takes people away from the table and turns them away, instead of brings them into the table in the circle, and we all start working together. So I really appreciate your sentiments, Jason, this morning. I appreciate you constantly helping to educate us and the community on these things, and I appreciate, also mentioning that we want, and we're all here to help those who are seeking affordable housing and rentals understand the issues, learn how to prepare, get ready, get on lists, understand that once you're on a list for an affordable home, you have to keep up your finances, so you don't want to go out and buy another truck suddenly because you've been waiting a while, and then find out, whoop, your time has come up and you're on the list, but now the finances no longer pencil out. So it is a continuum, as you point out. There's many things to unpack in this, starting from education, and we can all be educating our children now on thinking about housing and what, and where do they want to be, and do they want to start out. Most of us started out in rentals, and over time, as we improved our jobs and our wages, we're able to move up into other housing. So this is a continuum, as you mentioned, and there's many different levels that we can work in. And the thing that we all realize is we have to work in them all. We're behind in every area. And so now we need winning solutions. So thank you, Jason, for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. This is a great opportunity. And I hope you're going to tell everybody about Bill number 10 that's going up to the council.
Yeah, I am. We'll mention it really quickly. There is Bill 10, which is the bill based on the 201H housing policy. And what we're doing is, this is a statewide policy. Currently, for affordable housing and rentals, the policy is 50% plus one. And this is a bill sponsored by Mike Molina. And he would like to take that up to 75%. So from 50% plus one to 75%. And what we found is, and his theory is that we just need to get more done. We all agree we need to get more done. And his theory is that more can be done because there are projects coming in at over 75%, or over 50% plus one, which can be over 75% up to even 100%. There are some projects. But the development community also acknowledges that. But what they also acknowledge is, to get to that 100% or 75% up to 100%, there are conditions that make it work. And it can be a lot of other options or things that have to come together. So what they're saying is, you will lose a lot of development options if you put this in as a new mandate. And we are seeing people come out from the home building community to say, look, let me show you why this doesn't pencil out. And there's no smoke and mirrors here, folks. This is people coming out, opening things up, sharing and saying, let's get this done. We have an urgent situation, but here's why it doesn't pencil out. So that is coming up for hearing next Friday. And no, wait. Excuse me. This Friday. I was going to say, I have to check my calendar. So it is coming up for hearing this Friday. And the other really important thing to mention, and I want to mention quickly because I've got Aaron who's holding, and I want to get him on the line, is that it's coming up for hearing this Friday. And also, we've invested in a plan that we're supposed to hear on how we can move forward with affordable housing and rentals. So from Hawaii Community Assets. And we've invested, as a county, $300,000 to hear this plan. And we really think, before we start changing housing policies, we really need to hear from Hawaii Community Assets, who's going to be presenting a comprehensive plan. So if housing is important to you, we encourage you to share your thoughts. And with that, I'm getting a signal from my good buddy Gary, who's saying Aaron's holding, and we've got 4 minutes. So we'll leave that one where it's at. But thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate you, and I'll be talking to you and seeing you soon on the Zoom meeting, I'm sure. Aloha, Aaron.
Good morning. How are you?
I am excellent. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm so glad to have you on. Let me share with everybody. Aaron Williams is on the phone with us. He is the owner of Maui Jelly Factory. It is a business that he bought from the prior owners here on Maui. And Aaron, we are thrilled that you came in and bought this long-standing business. Please tell me what led you to buy this business and want to create jams and jellies. Did you have a history of that?
I did not. No, I had never made jelly or jam in my life. Lydia Hirose, who also was a graduate of Baldwin, grew up making jellies and jams with her mom here in the Guadalupe area. But it was something new to me. And we were both pursuing careers and left Maui. Back in the 90s, we both opened the Grand Hyatt Wailea back in the day and pursued careers in tourism, in the hospitality industry on the mainland. And we both truly wanted to get back to the island in one way or another. And it just so happened my sister, who was a financial advisor for Edward Jones, Penny Andrews in Wailuku, heard about this business opportunity, passed the information along, and we went through the process of doing due diligence and ended up buying the company from the prior owner back in September of 2019.
Wow. And I know you've been continuing it. So Maui Jelly Factory has always had a very diverse product line that's been cherished by local residents and those both near and far. Tell us about some of the local favorites that still exist and if there's any new things that have been added.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we used to repackage a coconut syrup that we purchased from Oahu. I think many businesses purchased the same syrup, but due to some health concerns of the prior folks that owned that company, we ended up developing our own recipe, and now it's one of the more popular coconut syrups throughout the state, actually. So we're really proud of that. But our flavors for locals, our mango chutney is a household item. The poha jam. Our liquid butter sauce is real popular. We developed a new product, the guava butter sauce, which is that since this past summer has been a great hit and an addition. And then we have the Hawaiian pepper jelly made with locally sourced Hawaiian peppers. There's that kick that some people like. It's great on a bagel and cream cheese and other items. But we have some staples, the passion fruit jelly as well as the guava strawberry jam that people, I think, know throughout the island of Maui and throughout the islands as our staples.
Awesome, Aaron. I'm getting a signal, and I'm sorry. We've got a little bit of time, so can you quickly tell me where people can find your products?
Absolutely. We are in every Foodland throughout the state, as well as CVS and Long Drugs in the whole state. But we also are at the Honokawai Farmers Market. The Olawalu Farmers Market has a great assortment of all of our products. And then we're also in the food pantries and ABC stores throughout the island of Maui as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aaron, for joining us. This is a very fast-paced Business Matters. Mahalo to everybody who's been listening in. We appreciate you. Visit us at mauichamber.com for more information. Aloha.